Everyone at Forward Operating Base Masterson knew Captain Elena Kovacs as the intelligence officer who spent 14 hours a day in the air-conditioned Tactical Operations Center analyzing enemy communications, intercepts, and drone footage. The Marines called her a POG behind her back. People other than grunts. The kind of officer who deployed to a combat zone, but never left the wire, never felt the weight of full combat gear in 100-degree heat, never understood what it meant to be downrange where bullets were real and incoming. What none of them knew, what Captain Kovacs had kept carefully hidden for the 11 months since her arrival at this dusty outpost in hostile territory, was that before she became an intelligence officer, she had spent 6 years as the primary instructor of the Marine Corps Scout Sniper School in Quantico, Virginia. 6 years teaching the deadliest marksmen in the American military how to kill from distances most people could not imagine. But that part of her life was locked away now, buried under classification levels and NITANO restrictions, hidden behind the bland cover of intelligence analysis work that made her invisible to the operators who mattered. The morning started the way most mornings started at FOB Masterson. Captain Kovacs sat in front of 3 monitors in the TOC, headphones covering her ears, listening to intercepted radio chatter while her eyes tracked movement patterns on overhead surveillance feeds. The air conditioning hummed steadily, keeping the operations center at a comfortable 68 degrees, while outside the temperature was already climbing past 90. She had been on shift since 0400, replacing the night watch intelligence analyst, and her coffee had gone cold 2 hours ago. The screens showed the usual patterns. Local nationals moving through the market district. A convoy of coalition vehicles returning from a northern patrol route. The enemy knew where the cameras were positioned, had learned to avoid the obvious surveillance corridors, but sometimes they made mistakes. Sometimes they revealed themselves in the gaps between what they thought was being watched and what actually was being watched. She heard them before she saw them. Boots on the plywood flooring outside the TOC, voices carrying that particular tone of frustration and anger that came after losing someone. The door opened and 3 Marines entered, still wearing their dust-covered combat gear, rifles slung across their chests. Corporal Vance led the group, his face streaked with dirt and something darker that might have been blood spatter. Behind him came Lance Corporal Ruiz and Private First Class Patterson, both of them looking hollowed out in the way that young Marines looked after their first real contact with mortality. Corporal Vance walked straight to the coffee station without acknowledging Captain Kovacs, even though she was the only other person in the TOC at that moment. He poured coffee into a paper cup with hands that shook slightly, spilling some on the counter. Ruiz dropped into one of the chairs along the wall, his rifle clattering against the chair frame. Patterson just stood there in the doorway, staring at nothing. Lost another one, Corporal Vance said to no one in particular. His voice was flat, drained of emotion through sheer exhaustion. Third one this week. Same bastard sniper. Same hide location probably. We never see him. Never get a shot. He just waits until someone is exposed, and then boom, gone. Ruiz leaned his head back against the wall, eyes closed. This time it was Sergeant Timmons. Good Marine. 3 kids back home. Never knew what hit him. Just walking point like he had done 100 times before, and then he was down. Medic said the shot was perfect. Center mass, right through the plate carrier gap. Whoever the shooter is, he knows exactly what he is doing. Captain Kovacs kept her eyes on her monitors, but her fingers had stopped typing. She knew which incident they were discussing. The report had come through 20 minutes ago. Patrol Delta 3. Movement through the Eastern Market District, 1 Kia, sniper fire from elevated position, no visual on shooter, medevac requested. She had immediately begun analyzing the intercept from that time window, listening for any enemy communications that might indicate sniper team positions, but the intercepts had been quiet. Too quiet. Professional discipline. Patterson finally spoke, his voice younger than the others, still carrying the shock of witnessing violent death up close. Intel said that route was clear. Intel said the threat level was low in that sector. Intel does not know shit because Intel sits in here with the air conditioning while we are out there dying. Captain Kovacs felt the words land like physical blows, but she did not turn around, did not respond, did not defend herself or her analysis. She had heard variations of this sentiment dozens of times over the past 11 months. The combat arms Marines, the infantrymen and scouts and machine gunners, they trusted each other because they bled together. They did not trust the support personnel, the people who deployed to combat zones, but worked in offices, who went to the chow hall 3 times a day and slept in climate-controlled housing units and never had to pull trigger guard duty at 0 dark 30 in the freezing desert night. Before we dive into this story, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe you have witnessed similar situations where someone's expertise was hidden or dismissed in your community. Corporal Vance finished his coffee and crushed the paper cup, tossing it toward the trash can and missing. That is the thing about intel weenies. They can tell you what happened yesterday. They can show you patterns from last month. But they cannot tell you where the next bullet is coming from. They cannot save the next Marine who steps into a kill zone. They just make their reports and send their summaries up the chain while we bag up our friends. The 3 Marines left, their boots heavy on the floor, the door closing behind them with a metallic click that echoed in the suddenly silent TOC. Captain Kovacs sat motionless for a long moment, staring at the monitors without really seeing them. Then she reached down beside her desk and pulled up a green canvas rifle case, setting it gently on the floor beside her chair. The case was covered in dust, had not been opened in months, but through the fabric she could feel the familiar shape of the custom Remington M40 A6 rifle inside. The weapon that had been her companion for 6 years at Quantico. The weapon she had used to teach hundreds of Marine Scout snipers the art of precision fire. The weapon that still bore the small brass plaque identifying her as a primary instructor at the schoolhouse. She ran her hand along the case, then pushed it back under the desk and returned to her keyboards. Her fingers flew across the keys as she pulled up the tactical map, overlaying the 3 previous sniper incidents from the past week. The pattern was there if you knew how to read it. The shooter was working from a consistent area, probably moving between 3 or 4 prepared hide sites, rotating positions to avoid counter-battery fire. The shots were all taken at similar times of day when the sun angle created glare that made observation difficult. The targets were all point men or team leaders, never the middle of a formation, never random targets of opportunity. This was a trained sniper, someone with real education in the craft, someone who understood fields of fire and escape routes, and how to remain invisible in an urban environment. Captain Kovacs pulled up the satellite imagery and began marking locations. She knew exactly where she would position herself if she were hunting coalition forces in this terrain. She could see the sight lines, the natural hides, the dead space that coalition patrols would instinctively avoid, but that provided perfect observation points. She had taught this, had spent years teaching Marines how to read terrain the way a sniper reads terrain, how to think like a hunter, how to become invisible while maintaining lethal effectiveness. But she was just an intelligence officer now, just a POG in an air-conditioned office. Just someone who made reports that no one trusted because she had never proven herself to the people who measured worth in combat action and blood sacrifice. Her analysis would be filed and ignored, the same way her previous analyses had been filed and ignored, and tomorrow, or the next day, another Marine would walk into a kill zone, and the sniper would take another perfect shot, and the Marines would come back angry and frustrated, and nothing would change. She looked at the rifle case under her desk one more time, then pulled up the communication software and began typing her daily intelligence summary. The summary documented the 3 sniper incidents, noted the pattern of similar methodologies, recommended increased counter-sniper protocols and restrictions on patrol routes through the Eastern Market sector. She knew before she finished typing that her recommendations would be read by a staff officer somewhere, maybe even discussed briefly at the evening briefing, and then dismissed as the overly cautious suggestions of someone who did not understand ground combat operations. The TOC door opened again, and Master Sergeant Chun entered, carrying his own coffee and a folder of morning reports. Chun was old Corps, had been a Marine for 26 years, had combat deployments going back to the 90s. He nodded to Captain Kovacs as he settled into the watch commander's station across the room. "Heard we lost Timmins this morning," Chin said quietly. He was speaking to Captain Kovacs directly, which was unusual. Most of the senior enlisted treated her with professional courtesy, but maintained distance, the natural separation between combat Marines and support personnel. "Good man. Solid NCO. Fourth sniper casualty in 8 days. This is becoming a problem." Captain Kovacs nodded, still typing. "I have been tracking the pattern. Same shooter, probably. Very disciplined. Professional tactics. He is not taking shots of opportunity. He is selecting specific targets and engaging from prepared positions with clear escape routes." Master Sergeant Shin looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You know a lot about sniper tactics for an intel officer." She felt her stomach tighten, but kept her voice neutral. "It is part of threat analysis, understanding enemy capabilities and methodologies." Chin opened his folder, but kept his eyes on her. "What is your background, Captain?" "Before intelligence, I mean." "Infantry officer," she said, which was true as far as it went. "Standard career progression." He nodded slowly, and she could see him processing something, some connection forming in his mind. "Where did you do your infantry officer course?" "Quantico," she answered, wondering where this was going. Chin was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I was stationed at Quantico for 3 years. 2015 to 2018. Worked at the Staff NCO Academy. Used to see the Scout sniper instructors around the base sometimes. There was a Captain Kovacs who taught at the Scout sniper school back then. She had a reputation. Best instructor they had, people said. Turned out snipers who could shoot the wings off a fly at 1,000 meters." Captain Elena Kovacs stopped typing. She did not look at Master Sergeant Sean, just stared at her monitors, watching the surveillance feeds cycle through their camera rotations. After a very long silence, she said quietly, "That was a different assignment, a different life. That is not why I am here." Chin nodded, asked no more questions, and returned to his reports. But she could feel his awareness now, the knowledge hanging in the air between them like smoke. Her secret was not so secret anymore, at least not to everyone, and she knew that in a deployed unit, information spread like wildfire. It was only a matter of time before others knew. Before the Marines who called her a POG discovered that the intelligence officer they dismissed had forgotten more about combat marksmanship than most of them would ever learn. The question was whether that knowledge would matter, whether it would change anything, or whether she would remain just another staff officer, watching from the TOC while the real fighters went outside the wire and died one by one to an enemy sniper she could have hunted down and killed in her sleep if anyone had bothered to ask. The morning briefing started at 0700 in the main operations building, a plywood and sandbag structure that smelled like diesel fuel and stale sweat. Captain Kovacs sat in the back row with the other staff officers, her notebook open, pen ready, while the combat arms officers filled the front rows. Lieutenant Colonel Hendricks stood at the front beside a large tactical map marked with colored pins and patrol routes, his desert camouflage uniform still crisp despite the early hour heat. "Gentlemen, we have a problem," Hendricks began, tapping the map with his pointer. "For coalition casualties in 8 days, all from sniper fire, all in the Eastern Market sector. The enemy has positioned a skilled shooter or shooters in this area, and they're systematically targeting our patrol leaders and point men. This is not random harassment fire. This is precision elimination of key personnel." Gunnery Sergeant Rains sat in the second row, his arms crossed over his chest. Rains ran the Marine Scout sniper team assigned to FOB Masterson, 3 two-man teams that rotated overwatch duties and counter-sniper operations. He was a thick man with a shaved head and forearms covered in tattoos. 20 years in the Corps, most of it spent behind a rifle scope. He had the weathered look of someone who had seen too much sun and too much combat. "Sir, my teams have been working this problem for 6 days," Rains said. "We have eyes on every approach to that market sector. We have observation posts on the 3 tallest buildings with clear sight lines. Whoever this shooter is, he is a ghost. We never see muzzle flash, never hear the shot until after impact. He fires and vanishes before we can get a spotter on his position." Lieutenant Colonel Hendricks nodded. What is your assessment of his skill level? Rains rubbed his jaw, choosing his words carefully. Professional. Real training, not just some farmer with a rifle. He understands sight lines and concealment. He knows our patrol patterns, our timing, our routes. He is patient enough to wait for the perfect shot and disciplined enough to take only one shot before displacing. In 20 years, sir, I've seen maybe 5 or 6 enemy snipers this good. Captain Kovacs raised her hand from the back of the room. The gesture felt strange, interrupting a briefing full of combat officers. But she had analyzed the pattern for 3 days, and she knew something they did not. Lieutenant Colonel Hendricks looked surprised to see her hand raised, but nodded for her to speak. Sir, based on the tactical analysis of the 4 incidents, I believe the shooter is operating from a rotation of 3 prepared hide sites, Kovacs said. She stood and walked to the map, aware of every eye in the room following her movement. The shots are being taken at similar times of day when sun angle creates maximum glare from the east. The targets are always exposed in terrain that funnels our patrols into predictable kill zones. If you overlay the previous incidents with the terrain analysis, there are only 3 locations that provide the necessary sight lines, concealment, and escape routes. She marked 3 spots on the map with her pen. Here, here, and here. An abandoned warehouse with partial roof collapse that provides overhead concealment. A residential building with reinforced upper floor that survived the fighting 2 years ago. And a water tower with access ladder that most coalition forces assume is too exposed, but actually provides perfect defilade from our standard observation posts. The room was silent. Gunnery Sergeant Rains stared at the map, his expression unreadable. Lieutenant Colonel Hendricks tilted his head slightly, studying her marks. Captain Kovacs, that is an interesting analysis, Hendricks said slowly. But I am curious how an intelligence officer developed such specific tactical insights in a sniper hide site selection. That is fairly specialized knowledge. She felt the weight of the question, the implied skepticism. I have studied enemy sniper tactics as part of my intelligence preparation work, sir. Understanding how they operate helps predict their patterns. Rains turned his chair to look directly at her. With all due respect, ma'am, I have been hunting snipers for 2 decades, and I would not have identified those 3 sites with that level of confidence. That kind of analysis requires actual experience in hide site selection, not just reading reports. Where exactly did you learn to think like a sniper? The room temperature seemed to drop despite the morning heat. Every officer was looking at her now, waiting for her answer. Captain Kovacs felt the familiar tension in her chest, the weight of the secret she carried, the carefully constructed cover that was beginning to crack. I attended advanced training courses in threat analysis, she said, keeping her voice level. Enemy sniper methodologies are part of the standard intelligence curriculum. Rain smiled, but there was no humor in it. Ma'am, I teach threat analysis courses. I know what is in the curriculum. What you just described is not intelligence school knowledge. That is fieldcraft. That is someone who has actually built hide sites and calculated sight lines and planned escape routes. That is someone who has been on both sides of the scope. Lieutenant Colonel Hendricks held up his hand. Regardless of where Captain Kovacs acquired her knowledge, the question is whether her analysis is accurate. Gunny Rains, what is your professional assessment of her proposed hide site locations? Rains looked at the map again, his jaw working. Honestly, sir, they're solid. Better than solid. If I was hunting coalition forces in this sector, those are exactly where I would set up. The warehouse gives you elevation and multiple firing ports. The residential building has structural integrity and clear egress to the north. The water tower is unconventional but brilliant because everyone assumes it is too obvious. He paused, then added, but that does not change the fact that identifying them from overhead imagery and patrol reports is not something most intelligence officers could do. Captain Kovacs returned to her seat, feeling exposed. Master Sergeant Chun was watching her from the side of the room, his expression thoughtful. She avoided his eyes. Lieutenant Colonel Hendricks made a decision. Gunny Rains, I want her teams to reposition for observation on these 3 sites. Set up counter-sniper overwatch and wait for our shooter to make his move. If Captain Kovacs is correct, we will get eyes on him when he occupies one of these positions. If she is incorrect, we have wasted some time, but we are no worse off than we are now. Rains nodded. Aye, sir. We will move into position tonight. But sir, if this guy is as good as I think he is, he might already know we are adjusting our tactics. These professional shooters, they watch us as much as we watch them. They know when patterns change. Then we will have to be more professional than he is, Hendricks said. Dismissed. The officers filed out of the briefing room. Captain Kovacs gathered her notebook and started for the door when she heard her name called. She turned to see Master Sergeant Chun approaching, his weathered face serious. Walk with me, Captain, Chun said quietly. They stepped outside into the brutal morning sun, the temperature already past 95 degrees. Chun led her away from the operations building toward the perimeter where the HESCO barriers created a wall between the base and the hostile world beyond. I know who you are, Chun said without preamble. I was at Quantico from 2015 to 2018. I saw you at the Staff NCO Club a few times. You were a captain then, too, but you were wearing Scout Sniper Instructor insignia. You had a reputation, Captain Kovacs. Best instructor the schoolhouse ever had, people said. Your students had the highest qualification rates and the lowest training failures in Scout Sniper School history. Kovacs said nothing, just stared at the barrier wall. Chun continued, I am not going to tell anyone. That is your business, and clearly you have your reasons for keeping it quiet. But ma'am, we are losing Marines to a sniper we cannot find. Good Marines, men with families. And you're sitting in the TOC analyzing intercepts when you could be out there hunting this bastard. I am an intelligence officer now, Chun. That is my assignment. That is what I am supposed to be doing. Chun shook his head. Ma'am, I'm just a master sergeant, so maybe I do not understand the big picture. But from where I stand, we have a killer picking off our people, and we have someone on this base who could stop him, but she's choosing to stay hidden because of some classified assignment or career consideration or whatever reason makes sense to the people who make these decisions. And that does not sit right with me. She felt anger flash through her, sharp and hot. You think this is about my career? You think I am hiding because I am worried about some fitness report or promotion opportunity? Then what is it about, ma'am? Because right now it looks like false modesty or misplaced priorities while Marines are dying. Captain Kovacs turned to face him fully, her voice low and hard. I am an intelligence officer because intelligence work requires being underestimated. It requires people to dismiss you as harmless, as background noise, as someone not worth paying attention to. The moment I reveal that I have combat skills, that I am a threat, I lose that advantage. I become someone the enemy watches, someone they target, someone they plan for. And the intelligence I gather becomes compromised because I am no longer invisible. Chun absorbed this, nodded slowly. I understand, ma'am. I do. But the enemy already knows we have scout snipers on this base. We are not hiding that capability. What we do not have is someone who can outthink their sniper, someone who can predict his moves and get inside his decision cycle. And based on what I just watched in that briefing, you can do that. You proved it by identifying those hide sites from nothing but patrol reports and imagery. Before Kovacs could respond, an explosion echoed across the base. Both of them turned toward the sound, instinct taking over. A column of black smoke rose from beyond the eastern perimeter. Radio chatter erupted from nearby buildings, voices urgent and overlapping. Patrol Delta 4, contact, sniper fire, 1 urgent surgical, need medevac immediately. Enemy position unknown, same sector as previous incidents. Captain Kovacs and Master Sergeant Chun ran toward the operations center. 5 casualties now. 5 Marines dead or critically wounded in 8 days. All from the same enemy sniper that she could hunt down and eliminate if she was willing to step out of the shadows and become visible again. The same sniper who was proving that remaining invisible while good men died was no longer an option she could live with. Private First Class Danny Oakes died before the medevac helicopter could reach FOB Masterson. 22 years old, from a small town in Nebraska, engaged to his high school sweetheart who was pregnant with her first child. The bullet had entered through the gap between his shoulder and chest plate, severing his subclavian artery. He bled out in 4 minutes while his squad mates applied pressure and called for help that arrived too late. The same precise shot placement, the same professional execution, the same invisible enemy. Captain Kovacs stood in the TOC, listening to the radio traffic, her hands gripping the edge of her desk so hard her knuckles turned white. She had identified the hide sites. She had given them the locations. And the sniper had still gotten another kill because Gunnery Sergeant Rains and his teams had not repositioned quickly enough, had not anticipated that the enemy would strike again so soon, had not understood that a professional sniper does not wait for his opponents to adjust before pressing his advantage. Lieutenant Colonel Hendricks called an emergency briefing for 1400 hours. The mood in the operations building was darker than Kovacs had ever seen it. Marines sat with their rifles between their knees, staring at the floor. Officers spoke in hushed voices. The casual confidence that had marked earlier briefings was gone, replaced by the grim awareness that they were being hunted by someone better than them. Hendricks did not waste time with preliminaries. 5 dead in 8 days. 5 Marines who trusted us to keep them safe, who followed our patrol routes and our security protocols, and who died because we cannot find one enemy shooter. This is unacceptable. This is a failure of intelligence, a failure of counter-sniper operations, and a failure of leadership. Mine included. He pointed to the tactical map. Captain Kovacs identified 3 probable hide sites yesterday. Gunny Rains, did your teams observe any of those locations? Rains stood, his face haggard. Sir, we repositioned last night to cover the warehouse and the residential building. We did not have enough personnel to cover the water tower simultaneously. The shooting this morning came from a 4th location we had not identified. A partially collapsed mosque 400 meters south of Captain Kovacs's predicted sites. Hendricks turned to Kovacs. Captain, why was that location not on your list? She had been expecting this question, had been preparing her answer since the shooting. Sir, the mosque was damaged in fighting 3 years ago, and I assessed it as structurally unsound for sniper operations. I was wrong. The shooter is willing to accept higher risk in exchange for an unexpected firing position. Rains shook his head. With respect, sir, that is the problem right there. Captain Kovacs is making assessments from satellite photos and reports. She has never walked that terrain. She has never evaluated those structures from the ground. She is guessing, and her guesses are getting Marines killed. The words hit like a physical blow. Kovacs felt her face flush, but forced herself to remain still, to accept the criticism without visible reaction. Rains was not wrong. She had identified probable sites based on theory and analysis. But theory failed when confronted with an enemy willing to break the rules she expected him to follow. Hendricks rubbed his temples. Gunny, what do you recommend? Sir, I recommend we restrict all patrols in the eastern sector until we can flood the area with enough observation posts to cover every possible firing position. We saturate the zone with eyes and wait for him to reveal himself. That could take weeks, Hendricks said. We cannot abandon an entire sector of our area of operations because of one sniper. The locals depend on our patrols for security. The enemy will interpret withdrawal as weakness. Then we're going to keep losing Marines, sir, Rains said flatly. Because right now we are playing his game by his rules, and we are losing. Captain Kovacs stood up from the back row. Sir, request permission to speak. Hendricks looked surprised but nodded. Go ahead, Captain. Sir, Gunny Rains is correct that satellite analysis has limitations. But restricting patrols is not the answer. That gives the enemy exactly what he wants, which is freedom of movement and the psychological victory of forcing us to change our operations. What we need is someone on the ground who can read the terrain the way the enemy sniper reads it. Someone who can anticipate his next position based on how he thinks, not just where the buildings are located. And where exactly are we going to find someone like that, Captain? Rains asked, his voice heavy with sarcasm. Because my scout sniper teams are the best trained shooters on this base, and they have not been able to predict this guy's movements. So unless you know some secret expert we have been hiding somewhere, I do not see how we solve this problem. The room went quiet. Kovacs felt every eye turn toward her. This was the moment, the decision point. She could remain silent, could maintain her cover, could stay invisible and safe while more Marines died. Or she could step into the light and accept everything that came with it. Master Sergeant Chun was watching her from the side wall, his expression neutral, but his eyes knowing. "Sir, I volunteer to accompany the next patrol into the eastern sector as an intelligence asset," Kovacs said. "I can provide real-time terrain analysis and threat assessment from the ground." Lieutenant Colonel Hendrix Froned. "Captain, you're an intelligence officer, not an infantry marine. You have not been outside the wire since you arrived at this FOB. I appreciate the offer, but I cannot justify risking a staff officer on a combat patrol when we already have trained personnel for ground operations." Rains turned to look at her fully. "Ma'am, no offense intended, but have you ever even been in a firefight? Have you ever moved under fire or conducted tactical operations in hostile territory? Because walking around inside a secure FOB is very different from operating outside the wire, where people are actively trying to kill you." Kovacs met his stare. "Gunny, I have been in situations you cannot imagine in places that do not exist on any official map. I have operated in hostile territory where the enemy had every advantage and we still accomplished our mission. I know what combat looks like and I know how to function under fire." Rain smiled, incredulous. "Ma'am, with all due respect, that sounds like a lot of vague claims without any specifics. Every staff officer thinks they are hard until the bullets start flying. I cannot risk my Marines babysitting an intel officer who might freeze up or make a stupid decision because she has never actually done this before." She felt the anger rising again, but controlled it, channeled it. "Gunny Rains, I am not asking you to babysit me. I am offering expertise that your teams do not have. I can identify sniper positions before the enemy occupies them. I can predict firing solutions and escape routes. I can think like the shooter you are hunting because I have trained dozens of shooters exactly like him." The room erupted in murmurs. Rain stood up fully, his face reddening. "Ma'am, you're claiming you can think like a professional enemy sniper because you train scouts at some intel school? That is the most ridiculous thing I have heard all day." "Not an intel school," Gunny, Kovacs said quietly. "At Quantico, at the Marine Corps Scout Sniper School, where I served as primary instructor for 6 years before I transitioned to intelligence work." The silence that followed was absolute. Officers stared at her in disbelief. Rains looked like he had been slapped. Even Hendrix appeared stunned. "You were a scout sniper instructor?" Rains said slowly. "At the actual schoolhouse? Training actual snipers?" Master Sergeant Chun spoke up from the wall. "I was stationed at Quantico from 2015 to 2018. Captain Kovacs had a reputation as the best instructor the Scout Sniper School ever had. Her students had the highest qualification rates in the program's history. If she says she can think like the enemy shooter, Gunny, I would believe her." Hendrix found his voice. "Captain Kovacs, why did you not mention this background when you arrived at this FOB? Why have you been working intelligence instead of counter-sniper operations?" "Because intelligence work requires being underestimated, sir. It requires the enemy to dismiss me as non-threatening. The moment my combat capabilities become known, I lose effectiveness as an intelligence officer. But at this point, maintaining cover is less important than stopping the Marine who is killing our people." Rains was staring at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "Ma'am, if what you're saying is true, if you really were an instructor at the Scout Sniper School, then you are right. You can probably outthink this enemy shooter. But that also means you have been sitting in the TOC for 11 months while you could have been hunting him. That means 5 Marines died while you protected your cover story." She absorbed the accusation, felt its truth cut deep. "You are right, Gunny. I made a choice to prioritize my intelligence mission over direct action. That choice got Marines killed. I own that. But I'm offering to fix it now, if you will let me." Hendrix looked at Rains, then back at Kovacs. "Captain, if I authorize you to accompany a patrol, can you identify where this sniper will position himself for his next shot?" Kovacs thought about the pattern, the methodology, the discipline she had observed. "Sir, I can identify the 3 most probable positions based on his pattern of operations, his willingness to accept risk, and his tactical objectives. I cannot guarantee which one he will choose, but I can narrow it down enough that Gunny Rains can position his teams effectively. Hendricks made his decision. Approved. You will accompany Patrol Delta 2 tomorrow morning at 0600. Gunny Rains, your scout sniper teams will provide overwatch based on Captain Kovacs's ground assessment. And Captain, if this goes wrong, if you freeze up or make mistakes that get Marines killed, I will personally see to it that your career ends with a court-martial. Are we clear? Crystal clear, sir. The briefing ended and officers filed out. Gunnery Sergeant Rains approached her as she gathered her notebook. Ma'am, I hope you know what you're doing. Because if you're wrong about your abilities, people are going to die. And if you were right, then you let 5 Marines get killed while you sat on your skills. Either way, you have a lot to prove tomorrow. I know, Gunny, and I will prove it. Captain Kovacs spent the evening in her containerized housing unit preparing for the morning patrol. She laid out her gear with the methodical precision of someone who had done this hundreds of times before. Body armor, helmet, rifle magazines, medical kit, hydration system, communications equipment, everything checked and rechecked, every piece of equipment positioned exactly where muscle memory would expect to find it. The rifle case sat open on her footlocker. The custom Remington M40A6 lay disassembled on a cleaning mat, each component gleaming under the harsh fluorescent light. She had maintained this weapon religiously for 6 years at Quantico, had fired thousands of rounds through it at distances ranging from 300 to 1,500 meters, had used it to demonstrate every principle of precision marksmanship to students who went on to become some of the deadliest snipers in the Marine Corps. Her hands moved automatically through the cleaning process. Bore brush through the barrel. Solvent on the cloth. Check the trigger mechanism. Inspect the bolt face. Oil the moving parts with careful precision. The familiar ritual calmed her mind, brought focus to the task ahead. Tomorrow she would step outside the wire for the first time in 11 months. Tomorrow she would prove that her skills were still sharp, that the years behind a desk had not dulled the instincts she had spent a decade developing. A knock on her door interrupted the rhythm. She covered the rifle with a towel and opened the door to find Gunnery Sergeant Rains standing in the darkness, still wearing his combat uniform, a folder under his arm. May I come in, ma'am? Rains asked. She stepped aside, and he entered, his eyes immediately finding the partially visible rifle on the footlocker. He said nothing about it, just handed her the folder. Tomorrow's patrol route, he said. 12 Marines, 2 vehicles, standard security patrol through the Eastern Market sector. We will be on the ground for approximately 4 hours. The patrol leader is Staff Sergeant Vega, solid Marine, 3 combat deployments. I briefed him that you will be providing real-time threat assessment, and he is not happy about having a staff officer on his patrol. I understand, Kovacs said, opening the folder to study the route map. Ma'am, I need to know something before we do this, Rains said. I need to know if you're really as good as Master Sergeant Chun says you are. Because tomorrow my Marines are going to be relying on your judgment, and if you are exaggerating your capabilities, or if your skills have degraded from disuse, people will die. Kovacs looked up from the map. What do you want to know, Gunny? Tell me about your best shot. Your longest confirmed kill. The one that proves you actually know what you are doing. She closed the folder, leaned against her desk. Helmand Province, Afghanistan, 2012. I was embedded with a Marine Expeditionary Unit conducting village clearing operations. Enemy sniper had killed 3 Marines over 2 days, always from extreme range, always displacing before we could acquire him. On the 3rd day, I identified his probable hide site based on terrain analysis and wind patterns. Set up on a ridgeline 1,400 meters from his position. Waited 6 hours in 110-degree heat. When he finally revealed himself to take another shot, I engaged. 1 round, center mass. Confirmed kill at 1,372 meters. Rains absorbed this, his expression unreadable. 1372 is a hell of shot. What rifle? M40A5 at the time. Same platform as this one, earlier generation. The conditions were perfect, though. Minimal wind, clear visibility, stable position. The shot itself was textbook. What made it difficult was the patience. Waiting for him to make the mistake. That is what separates the professionals from the amateurs. Rain said quietly. The amateurs rush. The professionals wait. He paused, then added, I looked up your service record this afternoon. Requested your full file through the admin section. You were not just an instructor at Quantico, ma'am. You were a combat veteran before that. 2 deployments to Afghanistan, 1 to Iraq. Multiple combat action ribbons. Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal with Valor Device. You have seen more action than half the Marines on this base. It was a different time, Kovacs said. A different mission. Why did you leave Scout sniper operations for intelligence work? That seems like a step backward for someone with your record. Because killing people is only one part of winning wars, Gunny. Understanding the enemy, anticipating their strategy, disrupting their operations before they can execute, that saves more lives than any sniper ever could. I went into intelligence because I wanted to have a broader impact than I could have behind a rifle scope. Rains nodded slowly. I respect that, ma'am. I do. But tomorrow you're going back to your old job. Tomorrow you're going to have to think like a killer again and make life and death decisions in real time. Are you ready for that? She met his eyes directly. I have never stopped thinking like a killer, Gunny. I just redirected how I applied it. Tomorrow I will show you that intelligence officers can be just as dangerous as snipers. Maybe more dangerous because we see the whole battlefield, not just one target. He almost smiled. Tomorrow morning, 05:30, we stage at the vehicle bay. Staff Sergeant Vega will brief the patrol at 0545. You will roll out at 0600. I will have 2 scout sniper teams positioned on overwatch buildings based on your ground assessment. If you identify a probable enemy position, you radio it to me and I will vector my teams onto it. Clear? Clear. Rains turned to leave, then stopped at the door. Ma'am, one more thing. The Marines on this patrol, they have heard rumors about your background, but they do not really believe it yet. They think you are a staff officer playing operator. You're going to have to earn their trust tomorrow through your actions, not your words. And if things go bad, if we make contact with that sniper, they need to see that you can function under fire, that you're not going to freeze up or make panic decisions. I understand, Gunny. I will earn their trust. He left, and she returned to her rifle, finishing the assembly and function check. The weapon felt right in her hands, the weight and balance exactly as she remembered. She worked the bolt, feeling the smooth mechanical precision. Dry fired at an imaginary target across the room. The trigger brake was crisp and clean. Everything was ready. She lay on her bunk fully dressed at 1200, knowing sleep would not come. Her mind was already running through scenarios, calculating angles and distances, visualizing the terrain she had studied on satellite imagery. The enemy sniper had proven himself to be patient and professional. He would not make obvious mistakes. He would not expose himself unnecessarily. But every sniper had patterns, habits, preferences that could be identified and exploited. She just had to find his. At 05:15, she was at the vehicle bay, checking her gear one final time. The 2 mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicles sat idling, their massive armored hulls painted in desert tan. Staff Sergeant Vega was briefing his Marines, pointing to a map spread across the hood of the lead vehicle. Vega looked up as she approached. Captain Kovacs, glad you could join us. I understand you are here to provide threat assessment and intelligence support. My orders are to follow your recommendations regarding potential sniper positions. I will be honest with you, ma'am. My Marines and I are not thrilled about having a staff officer on this patrol. We have a job to do, and we cannot babysit someone who might slow us down or make mistakes. Kovacs kept her voice level. Staff Sergeant, I am not here to slow you down. I am here to keep your Marines alive. When we get on the ground, I will identify probable enemy positions before we move into them. You can choose to follow my recommendations or ignore them. But if you ignore them and one of your Marines gets shot, that is on you. The Marines around the vehicles went quiet, watching the exchange. Vega stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. Fair enough, ma'am. But if your recommendations put my Marines in unnecessary danger or compromise our mission, I will override them. My job is to get these Marines home alive, and I do not care what your background is or what your reputation might be. Understood, Kovacs said. That is exactly what my job is too. Vega turned back to his Marines. Mount up. We roll in 5 mics. Kovacs climbed into the back of the lead MRAP, settling onto the hard bench seat next to a young lance corporal who looked like he had just graduated high school. The Marine nodded to her, but said nothing, his hands gripping his rifle with the white-knuckled tension of someone who knew they were heading into danger. The vehicles rumbled through the FOB gates at exactly 0600, the armored doors closing behind them with heavy metallic thuds. Outside the wire, into the space where the enemy waited, where a professional sniper had killed 5 Marines in 8 days, where Captain Elena Kovacs would either prove her expertise was real or confirm that she was just another staff officer pretending to be something she was not. She checked her radio one more time, confirmed the frequency with Gunnery Sergeant Rains, who was monitoring from the operations center. Then she pulled up the digital map on her tablet and began studying the terrain ahead, looking for the places where death might be waiting. The Eastern Market sector looked different from ground level than it did on satellite imagery. The buildings were more damaged, the streets narrower, the sight lines more complex. Captain Kovacs sat in the MRAP, studying the terrain through the small armored windows, her mind automatically calculating angles and distances. The convoy moved slowly through the streets, Marines scanning for threats, local nationals watching the vehicles pass with expressions ranging from curiosity to hostility. Staff Sergeant Vega's voice crackled over the radio. All stations, this is Delta 2 Actual. We are entering the primary patrol sector. Maintain interval and watch for IEDs. Gunners, stay alert. The turret gunner above Kovacs shifted position, his machine gun tracking across the rooftops. She could feel the tension in the vehicle, the way every Marine was coiled tight, ready for contact. They had all heard about the 5 casualties. They all knew that somewhere in this maze of buildings, an enemy sniper was watching and waiting. Kovacs keyed her radio. Delta 2 Actual, this is Watchdog. Recommend we alter route to avoid the main boulevard ahead. That street provides multiple elevated firing positions with clear sight lines and limited cover for dismounted personnel. There was a pause, then Vega responded. Watchdog, that boulevard is our primary route to the market center. What is your recommended alternate? Turn north at the next intersection, proceed 2 blocks, then east on the narrow street between the fabric shop and the medical clinic. That route keeps us in defilade from the elevated positions and reduces exposure time. Another pause. Vega was clearly weighing her recommendation against his mission requirements. Finally, he said, Copy, Watchdog. We will take your alternate route. All stations, prepare to turn north at next intersection. The convoy altered course. Kovacs watched the abandoned buildings slide past, her eyes scanning every window, every rooftop, every shadow that could conceal a shooter. The narrow street Vega chose was barely wide enough for the MRAPs, the armored vehicles scraping against concrete barriers on both sides. But she was right about the defilade. The buildings on either side blocked any elevated firing position. A sniper would have to be at ground level to engage, and ground-level shots were easier to locate and counter. They reached the market center without incident. The convoy halted, and Marines dismounted to conduct foot patrol through the crowded marketplace. Kovacs stepped out of the MRAP, her boots hitting the dusty street, the weight of her body armor suddenly oppressive in the morning heat. It had been 11 months since she had operated outside the wire, and the sensations flooded back immediately. The smell of diesel and sewage, the cacophony of voices speaking Arabic, the hyper-awareness that came from being in an environment where threats could emerge from any direction. Staff Sergeant Vega approached her, his rifle held in low ready position. Captain, my orders are to conduct a presence patrol through this market and interact with local vendors. We will be dismounted for approximately 30 minutes. I need you to identify any positions that could be used for sniper overwatch while we are exposed. Kovacs scanned the surrounding buildings. The market was enclosed on 3 sides by 2- and 3-story structures, most of them shops on the ground floor with residential space above. To the north was a partially collapsed hotel that provided elevated observation. To the east was the water tower she had identified in her briefing, still standing despite looking structurally questionable. To the south was a mosque with a damaged minaret that nevertheless offered a commanding view of the entire market. She pulled out her tablet and marked positions. Staff Sergeant, we have 3 primary concerns. The hotel to the north has multiple rooms with windows overlooking this position. The water tower to the east provides 360 observation but limited cover. The mosque minaret to the south is partially damaged but still accessible. If I was planning to engage this patrol, I would use the hotel because it offers the best combination of concealment and escape routes. Vega studied her marks. What about that apartment building to the west? Too low, Kovacs said. The sight angle from those windows would be blocked by the market stalls. A shooter, there would have limited fields of fire and no way to engage targets on the northern side of the market. The hotel is the optimal position. Vega keyed his radio. Overwatch 1, this is Delta 2 Actual. Watchdog has identified a probable sniper position in the damaged hotel structure bearing 035 from our current location. Request you vector onto that building for observation. Gunnery Sergeant Rains responded immediately from the Operations Center. Copy Delta 2. Overwatch 1 is repositioning now. Good call, Watchdog. The Marines spread out through the market, talking to vendors, buying fruit and bread as a goodwill gesture, maintaining the presence patrol that was supposed to demonstrate coalition commitment to local security. Kovacs stayed near the vehicles, her eyes constantly moving between the 3 buildings she had identified. The hotel especially. Something about it felt wrong. The windows were too dark, too perfect for observation. If she were hunting this patrol, that was exactly where she would position herself. 20 minutes into the patrol, her instinct proved correct. A lance corporal near the fruit stand suddenly jerked backward and collapsed, blood spraying from his shoulder. The crack of the rifle shot echoed across the market a fraction of a second later. Single shot, high velocity, precise placement that had missed the fatal zone by inches only because the Marine had moved at the last moment. Contact, sniper fire, Staff Sergeant Vega shouted into his radio. 1 Marine down, wounded, enemy position unknown. All personnel take cover. The market erupted into chaos. Local nationals scattered, vendors abandoning their stalls, Marines diving behind concrete barriers and vehicle hulls. Kovacs dropped behind Mrap's front tire, her mind already working the problem. Single shot meant the shooter had not achieved the kill he wanted and was likely repositioning. The angle of impact on the lance corporal suggested elevated firing position. The timing meant the sniper had waited for the patrol to become complacent before engaging. She keyed her radio. Overwatch 1. Did you observe muzzle flash from the hotel? Negative. Watchdog came to response from the scout sniper team. We have eyes on the hotel, and we saw no flash, no movement. The shot did not come from that building. Kovacs felt her stomach drop. She had been wrong. She had identified the hotel as the primary threat, and the enemy had shot from somewhere else. A Marine was bleeding because she had miscalculated. Staff Sergeant Vega would never trust her judgment again. The entire patrol was now pinned down because she had failed to predict the enemy's position. She forced herself to think. The shot had come from elevation. That much was certain from the angle. But not the hotel. Not the water tower, because Overwatch 1 had that covered. Not the mosque, because the sight angle was wrong. Where else? What she missed? Then she saw it. A 4th building she had dismissed as too damaged to be useful. The apartment complex to the northwest with a partially collapsed roof. She had assumed the structural damage made it unsuitable, but now she realized that was exactly why a professional would choose it. Everyone would assume it was too dangerous, too unstable. But a sniper willing to accept risk could position himself in the rubble and have an unobstructed view of the market. Watchdog to Overwatch 1, she radioed. Check the damaged apartment, building northwest of the market. Partial roof collapse, for stories, windows facing south. That is where he is. There was a pause. Then Overwatch 1 responded. We have movement. 2nd floor window, northwest corner. Confirm we have visual on probable shooter. Kovacs keyed the radio again, her voice urgent. Do not engage yet. He fired once, which means he knows he missed his kill shot. A professional sniper will displace immediately after a failed shot. He is already moving to his escape route. Overwatch 1, watch the north side of that building. He will egress from the back and move through the alley system toward the northern district. Staff Sergeant Vega was beside her now, his face tight with controlled anger. Captain, one of my Marines is bleeding because you told me the threat was in the hotel. You were wrong. I was wrong about the primary position, Kovacs said, not looking away from the apartment building. But I'm right about his egress route. If Overwatch 1 can get eyes on the north alley in the next 30 seconds, they can spot him moving. Overwatch 1, this is Delta 2 Actual, Vegas said into his radio. Can you reposition for observation on the north alley? Negative, came the response. We are locked into our current position. No sight line to the north side of that building. Then he's going to escape, Kovacs said quietly. He fired, he missed, and now he is gone. We will find a hide site, but it will be empty. 2 Marines were treating the wounded Lance Corporal, applying pressure to his shoulder wound. The bleeding was controlled, but the Marine was in shock, his face pale and slick with sweat. The medevac helicopter was inbound, 3 minutes out. Staff Sergeant Vega looked at Kovacs with an expression of profound disappointment. You told me you could predict where he would position. You told me you could keep my Marines safe. You were wrong, Captain. And now one of my men is going home with a bullet wound because I trusted your expertise. She had no response. He was right. She had failed. The enemy sniper had outthought her, had chosen a position she had dismissed as unlikely, had demonstrated that her skills were not as sharp as she had believed. 11 months behind a desk had cost her the edge she needed, and a Marine had paid the price for her arrogance. The medevac arrived and extracted the wounded Lance Corporal. The patrol returned to the FOB in silence, the Marines avoiding eye contact with Kovacs. When they dismounted at the vehicle bay, Gunnery Sergeant Rains was waiting. His face told her everything she needed to know. The word had already spread. The intelligence officer who claimed to be a scout sniper expert had failed her first field test. The Marines had been right to doubt her. She was just another staff officer pretending to be an operator. And 5 deaths would now become 6, because she could not deliver on her promises. Captain Kovacs sat alone in the operations center at 2300 hours, the screens glowing in the darkness, every other workstation empty. She had been reviewing the footage from the market shooting for 6 hours, running and rerunning the angles, studying the ballistics report, analyzing every decision she had made. The apartment building. She had seen it on the satellite imagery, had noted the structural damage, and had dismissed it as too unstable for sniper operations. A professional assessment based on sound reasoning, except that she had forgotten the most important rule of counter-sniper work. The enemy does not follow your rules. The enemy does what you think is impossible because that is how they stay alive. The door opened and Master Sergeant Chun entered carrying 2 cups of coffee. He set one in front of her without asking if she wanted it, then pulled up a chair beside her workstation. You have been in here since the patrol returned, Chun said. That was 12 hours ago. You need to sleep, ma'am. I need to figure out where I went wrong, Kovacs said, not looking away from the screen. I had 3 probable positions identified. I was so confident about the hotel that I convinced Overwatch 1 to focus there. And the shooter was in the one building I dismissed as too risky. A Lance Corporal is in a hospital because I forgot that good snipers embrace risk that everyone else avoids. Chun sipped his coffee. Ma'am, you identified 3 out of 4 possible positions on your first ground patrol after 11 months behind a desk. That is better than most scout sniper teams could do. The fact that you missed one does not erase the fact that you were right about the others. Being right about 3 positions does not matter when the 4th one is where the shooter actually was, Kovacs said. Staff Sergeant Vega trusted my assessment. His Marines trusted my assessment. And I failed them. Now I have lost whatever credibility I might have had. Tomorrow, Lieutenant Colonel Hendricks is going to pull me from field operations and send me back to the TOC where I belong. Chun set down his coffee cup. Captain, can I tell you something that might help? She finally looked at him. Go ahead, Master Sergeant. When I was a young corporal in Fallujah, back in 2004, we had a scout sniper attached to our platoon. Best shooter I ever saw. He could hit targets at distances that seemed impossible. We trusted him completely. Then one day we were clearing a building, and he called out that a room was clear. We went in, and there was an insurgent hiding in a closet. He opened fire and wounded 2 Marines before we killed him. Our sniper had missed the threat. He had made a mistake. And for weeks after that, nobody trusted his assessments anymore. They questioned everything he said, doubted his judgment, treated him like he was incompetent. Kovacs understood where this was going. What happened to him? He kept doing his job, Chin said. He did not quit. He did not let the failure define him. He went back out on the next patrol, and the next one, and the one after that. And eventually, through consistent performance and by saving lives when it mattered most, he earned back the trust he had lost. By the end of the deployment, he was the most respected Marine in the company. Not because he was perfect, but because he had failed and then proved he could still be trusted when it counted. The story was supposed to be encouraging, but Kovacs felt only the weight of her mistake. Master Sergeant, that sniper failed once. I have failed once on my first field operation. I do not know if I will get another chance to prove myself. Then make sure you're ready if you do get another chance, Chin said, because that enemy sniper is still out there. He is still killing Marines. And whether Hendricks keeps you in the field or sends you back to the TOC, this base still needs someone who can think like that shooter thinks. Someone who can predict his next move. And right now, you're still the best chance we have. Before Kovacs could respond, the radio on the desk crackled to life. All stations, this is Bravo 1 Actual. We have contact, sniper fire, grid November Victor 732846. 1 urgent surgical, request immediate medevac. Kovacs and Chun both stood simultaneously. Another shooting. 7 casualties now. The enemy sniper had struck again, this time hitting a different patrol in a different sector. The pattern was escalating. The shooter was becoming more aggressive, more confident, more willing to take risks because the coalition forces had proven they could not stop him. Chun grabbed his gear and headed for the door. I have to coordinate the medevac response. Ma'am, pull up the location grid and start analyzing the terrain. Even if Hendricks does not want you in the field anymore, we still need your assessments. Kovacs pulled up the tactical map and located the grid coordinates. The shooting had occurred in the western sector, nearly 2 kilometers from the previous incidents. A completely different area of operations. She pulled up satellite imagery and began studying the terrain, looking for the positions that a sniper would use, the sight lines and escape routes and defilade zones that created opportunities for precision fire. The door burst open and Lieutenant Colonel Hendricks entered, still pulling on his uniform blouse. Captain Kovacs, I need an immediate assessment of probable sniper positions in the western sector. Bravo 1 is pinned down, and we need to vector our quick reaction force to suppress the enemy. Kovacs brought up multiple camera angles and overlaid them on the terrain map. Sir, based on the reported grid location and the direction of patrol movement, I assess 3 probable firing positions. A water treatment facility with elevated tanks providing observation. A residential complex with rooftop access. And a communications tower with maintenance platform. The water facility is most likely because it offers the best combination of elevation and cover. Hendricks studied her analysis. You were wrong about the market shooting this morning, Captain. One of Staff Sergeant Vega's Marines is in surgery right now because your assessment missed the actual threat. Why should I trust your judgment now? She met his eyes directly. Sir, because I learned from that mistake. I dismissed the damaged apartment building because I assumed the enemy would avoid structural risk. I will not make that assumption again. The Western Sector water facility is partially damaged from fighting last year, which is exactly why a professional would choose it. Everyone assumes it is too dangerous, which makes it perfect for a shooter who understands that safety is an illusion in combat. Hendricks made his decision. Quick reaction force. This is TOC. Move to suppress probable enemy position at the water treatment facility, Western Sector. Coordinates to follow. Be advised, enemy sniper is professional level threat. Approach with extreme caution. Over the radio, The quick reaction force acknowledged and began their movement. Kovacs watched the overhead feeds as the armored vehicles raced through the streets toward the water facility. She had made her assessment based on the lesson from her failure. If she was wrong again, Lieutenant Colonel Hendricks would never trust her judgment on anything. Her career as an intelligence officer would be effectively over. But if she was right, if the enemy sniper was where she predicted, then maybe she could prove that her skills were still valid despite the morning's failure. The quick reaction force reached the water facility and dismounted. Marines moved through the damaged structure in tactical formation, clearing rooms and stairwells. Kovacs held her breath, watching the feeds, waiting to see if her analysis had been correct or she had failed again. TOC, this is Quick Reaction Force Actual, came the radio call. We have located a sniper hide site on the 3rd level of the water facility. Probable firing position with clear sight lines to the engagement area. Site is abandoned, but we have fresh brass, scuff marks, and equipment staging that indicates recent occupation. The shooter was here. Kovacs felt relief flood through her, followed immediately by frustration. She had been right about the position, but the sniper had already displaced, had already escaped through whatever egress route he had planned before taking a shot. They had found his hide site, but not the shooter himself. It was progress, but not victory. Hendricks looked at her with an expression that mixed respect with continued skepticism. You called it right this time, Captain. But the shooter is still in the wind. We are still losing Marines, and we are still no closer to stopping him. Sir, I can stop him, Kovacs said. But I need to be in the field. I need to be on the ground where I can read the terrain in real time and anticipate his moves before he makes them. Satellite imagery and after-action analysis will never be fast enough. I have to think at his speed, operate at his level. Hendricks was silent for a long moment. Captain, you failed this morning. You made an assessment that put Marines at risk. Staff Sergeant Vega has formally requested that you not be assigned to any future patrols with his unit. Most of the patrol leaders on this base now view you as a liability rather than an asset. Putting you back in the field is going to be a hard sell. Then do not sell it to them, sir. Order it. I'm not asking for their trust. I am asking for one more chance to prove that my mistake this morning was a learning experience, not a fundamental failure of capability. Let me go back out tomorrow. Let me show them that I can do this. Hendricks studied her, weighing the risk against the desperate need for any solution to the sniper problem that had now claimed 7 Marines. Finally, he said, one more patrol, Captain. One more chance. But if you fail again, if another Marine gets wounded or killed because of your assessment, I will not only pull you from field operations, I will recommend a formal investigation into whether your claims about your scout sniper background are even legitimate. Are we clear? Crystal clear, sir. He left, and Kovacs returned to her screens, pulling up every piece of intelligence data available on the enemy sniper operations. She had one more chance, one more opportunity to prove herself. And this time, she could not afford to make assumptions. This time, she had to think not like an instructor teaching theory, but like a hunter who understood that the most dangerous prey always chose the path everyone else thought was impossible. The pre-dawn darkness was absolute when Captain Kovacs arrived at the vehicle bay at 0:30, 2 hours before the scheduled patrol. She needed time to prepare, time to visualize the terrain, time to eliminate every assumption that might lead to another failure. Her rifle case lay across the workbench in the armory, the M40 A6 field stripped and gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. She had cleaned it again last night, checked every component, verified 0 on the scope, prepared the weapon as if she would be taking the shot herself. Gunnery Sergeant Rains found her there, running a bore snake through the barrel for the 3rd time. He watched silently for a moment before speaking. Most people do not prep their rifles like that unless they are planning to use them, ma'am. You expecting to take a shot today? Kovacs looked up from her work. I'm expecting to be ready if the opportunity presents itself, Gunny. Yesterday, I was thinking like an analyst. Today, I need to think like a sniper. Rains pulled up a stool and sat across from her. Captain, I need to tell you something before this patrol rolls out. The Marines on this base, they're talking. Word has spread about what happened at the market. Staff Sergeant Vega told people that you missed the threat, and one of his men got shot because of it. Some of the guys are saying you lied about your credentials, that you were never really a scout sniper instructor, that you're just a staff officer trying to play operator. She had expected this. Failure bred doubt. Doubt bred rumors. It was human nature. I cannot control what people say, Gunny. I can only control my performance going forward. Rains nodded. That is a good attitude, ma'am. But you should know that the patrol you're going on today, Patrol Charlie 3, they specifically requested that you not be assigned. Lieutenant Morris told the operations officer that he does not want someone with questionable judgment endangering his Marines. The only reason you're going is because Lieutenant Colonel Hendricks made a direct order. Then I will have to earn Lieutenant Morris's trust through my actions, Kovacs said. The same way I will have to earn everyone else's trust. By being right when it matters most. The armory door opened and a younger Marine entered, a corporal with sniper qualification badges on his uniform. He stopped when he saw Kovacs and Rains, clearly surprised to find anyone in the armory at this hour. The corporal's eyes went to the rifle on the bench, taking in the custom modifications and the Quantico instructor plaque mounted on the stock. "Ma'am, is that your personal weapon?" The corporal asked. "It is," Kovacs confirmed. The corporal moved closer, studying the rifle with the appreciation of someone who understood precision weapons. "That is a beautiful build, ma'am. I have never seen an M40A6 with that barrel configuration. Where did you get the work done?" "Quantico Armory, custom job for instructors," Kovacs said. "Free-floated barrel, match-grade trigger, custom stock bedding. It was built for long-range precision instruction." The corporal looked at her with new respect. "You were really an instructor at the Scout Sniper School?" "I heard rumors, but I thought maybe people were exaggerating. I was the primary instructor from 2010 to 2016, Kovacs said. Taught over 300 students during that time. Some of them are probably serving on this base right now." The corporal straightened slightly. "Ma'am, I graduated from a school in 2014. My primary instructor was a Captain Kovacs. I did not make the connection until right now. You taught me everything I know about fieldcraft and range estimation. You are the reason I qualified as a scout sniper." Kovacs studied his face, trying to place him among the hundreds of students she had trained. "What is your name, Corporal?" "Corporal Hayes, Mom. Derek Hayes. I was in class 0314. You gave me a passing score on my final stock even though I was 30 seconds over time because you said my hindsight construction was the best in the class." She remembered now. Hayes had been a quiet student, meticulous in his preparation, patient in his execution. He had struggled with the time limits, but excelled at the technical aspects of sniper craft. "You built a hide sight that was completely invisible from 15 meters, she said. "I walked right past you twice during the evaluation. That level of concealment was worth 30 seconds of extra time." Hayes smiled. "Ma'am, I need you to know something. Yesterday, when I heard that you missed the threat at the market, I did not believe the rumors that you were not qualified. I knew you were the real deal because I learned from you personally. And if you're going on patrol today, I want to be there. I want to show the other Marines that your training works." Kovacs felt something shift in her chest. One Marine who believed in her. One student who remembered what she had taught him. It was not much, but it was something. "Were you assigned, Corporal?" "I am one of Gunny Rains' scout sniper team leaders, ma'am. I will be providing overwatch for today's patrol." Rains stood up. "Hayes is one of my best shooters, Captain. If you can give him a probable enemy position, he will put rounds on target. He has never missed when it counted." "Then let me show you what I am planning," Kovacs said. She pulled out a tablet and brought up the satellite imagery of today's patrol route. Charlie 3 is moving through the southern industrial sector. The terrain is different from the market and the Western Water Facility. More open space, fewer tall buildings, more warehouses and factory structures. Hayes leaned over the tablet, studying the map with professional interest. "That is rough terrain for sniper operations, ma'am. Limited elevated positions, mostly flat industrial buildings. Where would you position if you were hunting that patrol?" Kovacs zoomed in on a specific structure. This grain silo complex. It is 300 meters from the main patrol route, appears abandoned, but the upper observation deck provides 360-degree visibility. Everyone will dismiss it as too exposed because it is the tallest structure in the area, which is exactly why a professional would choose it. The enemy sniper has proven he selects positions that seem too risky for conventional thinking. Hayes traced the sight lines with his finger. The deck is exposed, but if he positions himself on the interior side, he could fire through the access door while staying in shadow. The elevation gives him advantage on range calculation, and the structure probably has multiple egress routes through the silo system. Ma'am, that is brilliant. That is exactly the kind of unconventional positioning you taught us at Quantico. Rains examined the map. Captain, if you're right about this, what do you want Hayes' position for Overwatch? Kovacs pointed to a warehouse rooftop 400 meters west of the silo. Here, Hayes can observe the silo deck from an elevated position without being skylined. If the enemy sniper moves to engage the patrol, Hayes will have a clear shot on his position. Hayes nodded enthusiastically. I can make that shot, ma'am. 400 meters, elevated position to elevated position. I have trained for that exact scenario. If he shows himself, I will put him down. The confidence in Hayes' voice reminded Kovacs of why she had become an instructor in the first place. This was the purpose of teaching, not just to impart technical skills, but to create competent professionals who could execute under pressure. Hayes believed he could make the shot because she had trained him to believe in his abilities. Now, she had to prove that her own abilities were still worthy of that faith. The rest of the patrol assembled at 0600. Lieutenant Morris was a young officer, maybe 25 years old, with the intense focus of someone who took his responsibility seriously. He briefed his Marines with crisp efficiency, outlining the route, the objectives, the contingency plans. When he mentioned that Captain Kovacs would be accompanying the patrol, several Marines exchanged glances. The skepticism was obvious. Morris approached her after the brief. Captain, I want to be clear about something. My orders are to follow your tactical recommendations regarding potential sniper threats. But if I assess that your recommendations put my Marines in unnecessary danger, I will override them. My job is to complete this mission and bring everyone home alive. Clear? Clear, Lieutenant. I expect nothing less. The patrol moved out as the sun began to rise over the eastern horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Kovacs sat in the lead vehicle, watching the terrain scroll past, her mind running through scenarios and contingencies. The grain silo would come into view approximately 15 minutes into the patrol route. If the enemy sniper was positioned there, he would wait until the patrol was fully committed to the industrial sector before engaging. He would want maximum target exposure and minimum opportunity for the patrol to take cover. Hayes radioed from his Overwatch position. Overwatch 3 is in position with eyes on the grain silo complex. No movement observed at this time. Maintaining watch. Copy. Overwatch 3, Kovacs responded. The enemy is patient. He will wait for the perfect shot. Stay alert. The convoy entered the industrial sector. Warehouses and factory buildings lined both sides of the street, their walls scarred by years of conflict. The grain silo rose in the distance, its observation deck clearly visible against the morning sky. Kovacs felt her pulse quicken. This was the moment. Either her analysis was correct and the sniper was there, or she had failed again and another Marine would pay the price for her mistake. Lieutenant Morris ordered the patrol to dismount for a security sweep of the main warehouse. Marines spread out in tactical formation, their weapons ready, their movements professional. Kovacs stayed near the vehicles, scanning the silo deck through her binoculars. Nothing. No movement. No indication of occupation. Maybe she was wrong again. Maybe the enemy had chosen a different position. Maybe her theory about unconventional placement was just another assumption that would prove false. The doubt crept in, cold and insidious. Then Hayes' voice crackled over the radio, urgent and controlled. Overwatch 3 has movement in the silo deck access door. I have visual on probable shooter, dark clothing, weapon visible. Request permission to engage. Captain Kovacs felt time compress in a crystalline clarity. Hayes had visual on the enemy sniper. The shooter was in the grain silo exactly where she had predicted. Everything came down to the next 30 seconds. Either Hayes would eliminate the threat, or the enemy would fire first and another Marine would fall. Hold fire. Overwatch 3, Kovacs transmitted, her voice calm despite her racing heartbeat. Confirm positive identification before engagement. We need to be certain this is our target and not a civilian. Over the radio, she could hear Hayes's breathing, controlled and measured. The discipline she had taught him at Quantico, holding strong under pressure. Positive identification confirmed, Hayes said. Subject is holding a rifle, scoped weapon, positioned for observation of the patrol. This is our shooter. Kovacs keyed her radio to the patrol frequency. Charlie 3 Actual, this is Watchdog. We have probable enemy sniper confirmed in the grain silo observation deck. Recommend immediate dispersal of dismounted personnel and authorization for Overwatch 3 to engage. Lieutenant Morris responded instantly. All Charlie 3 elements, take cover immediately. Overwatch 3, you are cleared hot. Engage the target. Hayes's rifle cracked once, the sound echoing across the industrial sector. Through her binoculars, Kovacs saw the impact, a puff of concrete dust from the silo deck railing. The enemy sniper dropped below the lip of the observation platform, disappearing from view. Miss, Hayes transmitted, frustration evident in his voice. Target displaced immediately after my shot. He is still in the structure, but I no longer have visual. Kovacs's mind raced through the tactical geometry. The enemy sniper knew he had been spotted. He knew there was a coalition marksman with eyes on his position. A professional would not try to re-engage from the same location. He would displace to his prepared escape route. But which direction? She pulled up the satellite imagery on her tablet, studying the grain silo structure. The building had been constructed decades ago, designed for industrial efficiency with multiple access points and internal pathways. If she were trapped in that silo with a hostile shooter locked onto her position, where would she go? Watchdog to Overwatch 3, Kovacs transmitted. The silo has an internal stairwell on the northeast corner and an external maintenance ladder on the south side. He will use the internal stairs to descend because the external ladder makes him visible. He is moving down right now toward ground-level egress. Copy, Watchdog, Hayes responded, but I cannot reposition fast enough to intercept. By the time I move, he will be out of the building. Then we intercept him on the ground, Kovacs said. She turned to Lieutenant Morris, who was crouched behind the MRAP beside her. Lieutenant, the enemy sniper is displacing through the silo interior. He will exit from one of 3 ground-level doors. If we can position Marines to cover those exits, we can trap him inside or take him when he emerges. Morris studied the silo through his rifle scope. Captain, that building is 300 meters from our current position. If we move Marines across open ground to surround it, we expose them to fire from any number of positions. I'm not risking my people on a guess about which door he might use. It is not a guess, Kovacs said. I studied that structure for 4 hours last night. The northeast door leads into an alley system that provides the best escape route. That is where he will exit. If we can get 2 Marines positioned to cover that door before he reaches it, we can end this. Morris hesitated, clearly weighing the risk. His Marines were watching him, waiting for the decision. The enemy sniper, who had killed 7 coalition personnel, was inside that building right now, and they had a chance to stop him. But sending Marines across open terrain on the word of an intelligence officer who had already failed once was a command decision that could end careers or lives. Corporal Hayes's voice came over the radio again. Lieutenant Morris, this is Overwatch 3. Captain Kovacs was my instructor at Scout Sniper School. She taught me everything I know about tactical geometry and enemy behavior prediction. If she says the target will exit from the northeast door, I trust her assessment completely. I recommend we act on her intelligence. The endorsement from one of Gunnery Sergeant Raines's best shooters carried weight. Morris made his decision. Corporal Jensen, Corporal Michaels, moved to cover the northeast exit of the grain silo. Stay in defilade. Use the warehouse walls for cover during movement. Do not expose yourselves unnecessarily. If the target emerges from that door, challenge him first and engage only if he presents a weapon. Two Marines broke from cover and began moving tactically toward the silo, using the warehouse structures for concealment. Kovacs watched their movement, professional and controlled, exactly the way infantry Marines were trained to operate. They reached positions flanking the northeast door within 90 seconds, their rifles trained on the exit. Now they waited. The enemy sniper was somewhere inside that silo, descending through the internal structure, moving toward what he thought was his escape route. He did not know that two Marines were waiting for him. He did not know that the intelligence officer he had been hunting coalition forces against had predicted his exact egress point. Unless she was wrong again. Unless he chose a different door, or had a tunnel exit, or decided to barricade himself inside and wait for darkness. The doubt crept back, whispering that she had failed before and would fail again, that her skills were theoretical knowledge disconnected from the reality of combat operations. Movement, Corporal Jensen transmitted. Northeast door is opening. Single subject emerging, armed with rifle. Subject is not responding to verbal challenges. He is raising his weapon. The staccato crack of M4 rifles echoed across the industrial sector. 3 rounds, precisely placed. Through her binoculars, Kovacs saw the enemy sniper stagger and fall, his rifle clattering to the concrete. The shooting stopped. The target was down. Target neutralized, Jensen reported. 1 enemy Kia, rifle and equipment secured. Requesting permission to approach and confirm. Permission granted, Morris said. All elements maintain security. Medevac is not required. This is a hostile Kia only. Kovacs felt her legs go weak. She had been right. The enemy sniper had exited exactly where she predicted. Her students' training had held. The threat that had killed 7 Marines and wounded others was finally eliminated. But she felt no triumph, only exhausted relief and the awareness of how close she had come to being wrong again. Lieutenant Morris approached her, his expression unreadable. Captain Kovacs, that was solid tactical analysis. You called his position and his egress route correctly. My Marines are alive because of your intelligence. She nodded, unable to find words. Morris continued. I need to apologize, ma'am. I doubted your credentials and your judgment. I requested that you not be assigned to my patrol because I thought you were a liability. I was wrong. You proved today that you know exactly what you are doing. Thank you, Lieutenant. But I need you to understand something. Yesterday I failed. I missed a threat and one of Staff Sergeant Vega's Marines got shot because of my mistake. Today I got it right, but that does not erase yesterday's failure. I am not infallible. I am just someone who has trained long enough to be right more often than I am wrong. Understood, Mom. But being right when it matters most is what counts in combat. And today, you were right when we needed you to be. The patrols secured the area while a tactical team cleared the grain silo. They found the enemy sniper's hide site on the observation deck, complete with prepared firing positions, spent brass from previous engagements, and intelligence materials that would take weeks to analyze. The enemy himself was a foreign fighter, well-trained and well-equipped, exactly the kind of professional threat that required professional countertactics to defeat. Gunnery Sergeant Rains arrived with the quick reaction force to secure the site. He found Kovacs sitting on the MRAP bumper, drinking water, her hands shaking slightly from adrenaline come-down. He sat beside her without speaking for a long moment. Corporal Hayes told me what happened, Rains said finally. Said you predicted the exact building and the exact door. Said it was textbook tactical analysis, the kind of thing you use to teach a Quantico. I got lucky, Kovacs said. If the enemy had chosen a different exit or stayed inside the building, we would still be hunting him. Rains shook his head. Ma'am, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. You prepared by studying that structure for hours. The opportunity came when Hayes spotted the target. You put those two things together and eliminated a threat that had been killing Marines for 2 weeks. That is not luck. That is professional competence. She looked at him. Gunny, yesterday I failed. Today I succeeded. Which one represents my actual skill level? Both, Rains said. You failed yesterday because you made an assumption. You succeeded today because you learned from that assumption and adjusted your thinking. That is what separates good operators from bad ones. Bad operators fail and make excuses. Good operators fail and learn. You proved today that you are a good operator. The convoy returned to FOB Masterson 3 hours later. Word had already spread through the base about the enemy sniper's elimination. Marines lined the road leading to the vehicle bay, watching as the patrol vehicles rolled through the gates. There was no cheering, no celebration, just the quiet acknowledgement that a threat had been removed and the mission had been accomplished. Lieutenant Colonel Hendricks met the patrol at the vehicle bay. He spoke briefly with Lieutenant Morris, then approached Kovacs. "Captain, good work today. The enemy sniper, who has been plaguing this base for 2 weeks, is no longer a threat. Your tactical analysis made that outcome possible." "Thank you, sir," Kovacs said. Hendricks studied her for a moment. "Captain, I need to know something. Are you planning to return to intelligence operations, or do you want to continue providing tactical support for ground patrols?" She had been asking herself the same question since the shooting ended. The intelligence work was important, provided strategic value, kept her invisible and safe. But today she had remembered what it felt like to operate at the edge of capability, to make decisions that directly saved lives, to use the skills she had spent years developing for their intended purpose. "Sir, I think I could be most effective doing both. Intelligence analysis during planning and preparation, tactical support during execution. The two skill sets complement each other." Hendricks nodded. "Agreed. From now on, you are authorized to provide ground-level tactical assessment for any patrol that requests your support. And Captain, about yesterday's failure at the market. That mistake probably saved lives today because it taught you not to make assumptions. Sometimes our failures are more valuable than our successes." "Yes, sir. I understand that now." The intelligence materials recovered from the grain silo told a story that Captain Kovacs found deeply unsettling. The enemy sniper had not been working alone. The documents, maps, and communications equipment suggested a coordinated network of multiple shooters operating across the region. The man they had killed in the industrial sector was just one operator in a larger campaign designed to systematically eliminate coalition leadership and degrade operational effectiveness. She sat in the operations center at 0200 hours, 3 days after the grain silo engagement, translating the recovered documents with the help of the base interpreter. The Arabic script detailed targeting priorities, rotation schedules, and coordination protocols between multiple sniper teams. What coalition forces had assumed was one exceptionally skilled shooter was actually a coordinated cell of 4 professional snipers, taking turns engaging targets from different sectors. Master Sergeant Chun entered the TOC, carrying his inevitable coffee. He looked at the documents spread across her desk and whistled low. That is a lot of intelligence material for one dead shooter to be carrying. Because he was not alone, Kovacs said, "We eliminated 1 sniper, but there are at least 3 more operating in the area. They have been rotating positions and sharing intelligence about our patrol patterns. That is why the shootings seemed so unpredictable. It was not one person adapting tactics. It was multiple people coordinating a campaign." Chun leaned over the desk to study the maps. "Have you briefed Lieutenant Colonel Hendricks yet?" "I am briefing him at 0600 along with all the patrol leaders." "But Master Sergeant, there is something else. Something that concerns me more than the fact that there are multiple snipers." "What is that, ma'am?" Kovacs pointed to a series of notations on one of the maps. "These markings indicate prepared positions that have not been used yet. Future hide sites for operations that have not been executed. And one of them is positioned to observe the main gate of this FOB. They're not just hunting our patrols anymore. They're planning to engage targets on the base itself." Chen's expression hardened. "When?" "The documents do not specify exact timing, but the notation says the operation is scheduled for after morning formation when personnel movement is highest. That gives them maximum target availability." "That is today," Chen said. "Morning formation is at 0730. We have less than 6 hours." Kovacs grabbed her radio. "TOC to Colonel Hendricks, urgent message. Request immediate contact." Hendricks responded within 30 seconds, his voice thick with sleep. This is Hendricks. What is the situation? Sir, intelligence analysis of recovered enemy documents indicates planned sniper attack on FOB Masterson main gate area during morning formation. Attack window opens in approximately 5 hours and 40 minutes. Recommend immediate defensive measures and alteration of formation protocols. There was a pause. Captain Kovacs, are you certain about this assessment? We cannot disrupt base operations every time we find a threatening document. Sir, the notations are specific. Grid coordinates for a hide site with direct line of sight to the main gate. Timing references that correlate to our standard morning formation. And most significantly, the handwriting matches the documents we found on the sniper we killed 3 days ago. This was his next planned operation before we eliminated him. Another pause, longer this time. All right, Captain. I am on my way to the TOC. Assemble all patrol leaders and security personnel for emergency briefing at 0500. We will implement counter-sniper protocols and modify our formation schedule. The briefing room filled quickly despite the early hour. Patrol leaders, scouts, sniper teams, security force commanders, all of them arriving with weapons and gear, ready to respond to whatever threat Kovacs had identified. Gunnery Sergeant Rains entered with Corporal Hayes and 2 other members of his sniper section. Lieutenant Colonel Hendricks wasted no time. Captain Kovacs has identified a credible threat to this FOB based on intelligence recovered from the enemy sniper killed 3 days ago. Captain, brief the details. Kovacs stood and activated the overhead projector, displaying the enemy maps and documents. Gentlemen, the shooter we eliminated in the industrial sector was part of a coordinated sniper cell consisting of at least 4 trained operators. They have been rotating positions and sharing intelligence to create the impression of a single unpredictable threat. These recovered documents show prepared hide sites for future operations, including one position to engage personnel at our main gate during morning formation. Staff Sergeant Vega, who had not spoken to Kovacs since the market incident, raised his hand. Captain, where exactly is this hide site located? Kovacs zoomed in on the satellite imagery. The documents indicate a position in the abandoned construction site, 420 meters northeast of the main gate. The partially completed building provides elevation and multiple firing ports with clear sight lines to the formation area. Based on the markings, the sniper plans to engage from the 3rd floor, using the building's structural skeleton for concealment. Lieutenant Morris studied the imagery. That building has been abandoned for 2 years. We have observation posts that cover the perimeter, but nobody specifically watching that structure because it is well outside the immediate threat ring. Which is exactly why a professional would choose it, Kovacs said. It is far enough away that we dismiss it as irrelevant, but close enough for accurate precision fire with a scoped rifle. The enemy has been studying our security patterns and found the gap in our coverage. Gunnery Sergeant Rains stood up. Sir, I recommend we position a scout sniper team on that building immediately. If an enemy shooter shows up to occupy that hide site, we take him before he can engage our personnel. Hendricks nodded. Make it happen, Gunny. I want your best team in position before 0600. Full ghillie suits, prepared to observe and engage. Rules of engagement are weapons tight until you confirm hostile intent. Then you are authorized to engage without further clearance. Rains looked at his team. Hayes, you are with me. Grab your gear and meet me at the north gate in 10 minutes. We are going hunting. Corporal Hayes stood immediately. Aye, Gunny. Kovacs felt compelled to add something. Gunny, the enemy sniper who occupies that position will be expecting our standard security posture. He will not be expecting a scout sniper team already in place waiting for him. But if he is as professional as the one we killed, he will conduct a thorough reconnaissance before occupying the hide site. You need to be invisible. Rains almost smiled. Ma'am, I was hiding for people before you were born. We'll be ghosts. The scout sniper team departed, and the briefing room slowly emptied as personnel moved to implement the defensive measures. Morning formation was canceled and replaced with staggered small group assemblies in covered locations. Additional security posts were established with overlapping fields of fire. The base went to heightened alert status, everyone aware that an attack might be imminent. Kovacs returned to the TOC and pulled up the live feed from the surveillance camera covering the construction site area. The building was barely visible in the pre-dawn darkness, just a skeletal outline against the sky. Somewhere in that structure, Rains and Hayes were positioning themselves, becoming part of the environment, waiting with the infinite patience that separated professional snipers from ordinary soldiers. The sun rose slowly, painting the eastern sky in gradual shades of orange and pink. Kovacs watched the feeds, drank coffee that had gone cold, and waited. Either her analysis was correct and an enemy sniper would attempt to occupy the prepared hide site, or she had disrupted base operations based on a misinterpretation of recovered documents. The doubt returned, familiar and corrosive. What if the timing was wrong? What if the operation had been canceled? What if she had cried wolf and damaged her credibility just as she was beginning to rebuild it? At 017, Gunnery Sergeant Rains's voice came over the radio, calm and professional. TOC, this is Overwatch Actual. We have visual on one individual approaching the construction site from the northeast. Subject is carrying a long package consistent with a rifle case. Subject is moving tactically, conducting counter-surveillance. This appears to be our target. Kovacs felt her heartbeat accelerate. She keyed her microphone. Overwatch Actual, confirm you have positive identification before engagement. We need to be absolutely certain this is a hostile sniper and not a civilian. Copy, Watchdog. We are observing. Subject is now entering the building. He is moving to the third floor. He is unpacking what appears to be a scoped rifle. He is establishing a firing position oriented toward the main gate area. Lieutenant Colonel Hendricks had entered the TOC during the transmission. He stood beside Kovacs, watching the surveillance feed, his jaw tight. Can your team take the shot, Gunny? Affirmative, sir. We have clear line of sight. Range is 180 meters. No wind. Perfect conditions. Awaiting authorization. Hendricks looked at Kovacs. Captain, this is your intelligence assessment. Are you confident this is a hostile sniper preparing to engage our personnel? She thought about the documents, the maps, the detailed planning that had gone into preparing this hide site. She thought about the 7 Marines who had died, the others who had been wounded, the coordinated campaign to degrade coalition effectiveness. And she thought about the professional sniper now setting up his rifle in that building, believing he was safe, believing he had found a gap in the defensive coverage, not knowing that 2 Marine Scout snipers have been waiting for him in the darkness. Sir, I am confident. This is an enemy sniper preparing to execute a planned attack on this base. Authorization to engage is warranted. Hendricks keyed his radio. Overwatch Actual, you are cleared to engage the target. Take the shot when ready. The radio was silent for 10 seconds. Then Hayes's voice, steady and controlled. Shot out. A single crack echoed across the base, distant but distinct. Through the surveillance camera, Kovacs saw a figure in the construction site collapse and remain motionless. Target down, range transmitted. Confirmed enemy Kia. Subject was armed with scoped rifle and positioned for observation of the main gate. Threat has been eliminated. Requesting security team to secure the site and recover enemy equipment. Hendricks exhaled slowly. Good shooting, Overwatch Actual. Secure the site and return to base. Captain Kovacs, your intelligence assessment just saved lives. Again, the equipment recovered from the second enemy sniper provided the final pieces of the tactical puzzle. Captain Kovacs sat in the intelligence cell examining the materials with forensic precision. Communications equipment, encrypted radios, detailed maps showing not just coalition patrol routes, but also internal base layout information that should have been classified. Someone had been feeding intelligence to the sniper cell. Someone on the inside. She brought her findings to Lieutenant Colonel Hendricks at 1400 hours, laying out the evidence on his desk with methodical care. Sir, the communications equipment we recovered includes message logs showing regular contact with a source identified only by the call sign Raven 6. The messages contain information about patrol schedules, formation times, and security postures that are only disseminated to coalition personnel with appropriate clearances. Hendricks studied the messages, his face darkening. "You're telling me we have a leak. Someone on this base has been providing operational information to enemy forces." "Yes, sir." The pattern of information sharing correlates directly with the timing of the sniper attacks. Before each engagement, Raven 6 provided updated intelligence on target locations and security measures. The snipers were not just skilled shooters. They were operating with insider knowledge that made them nearly impossible to counter. "Do we have any indication who Raven 6 might be?" Kovacs pulled out another document. "Sir, the message logs reference specific details that were only available to personnel attending the morning briefings in the operations building. That limits our suspect pool to approximately 30 people. Officers, senior NCOs, and essential personnel with access to classified patrol information." Hendricks sat back in his chair. "Captain, what you are describing is a counterintelligence investigation that could take weeks." "We do not have weeks. According to the documents you translated, there are still 2 enemy snipers unaccounted for. If they are receiving intelligence from Raven 6, they will know that we have discovered their operation, and they will either go to ground or accelerate their attacks before we can stop them." "Sir, there's another option. We use the communications equipment to send a false message to the remaining snipers. We pose as the dead shooter and request an emergency meeting to coordinate a response to our discovery of their operation. If they take the bait, we can identify their location and eliminate them. That assumes they do not already know their teammate is dead. They might have other ways of communicating that we have not discovered. It is a risk, sir, but based on the message protocols I have observed, the snipers only communicate through the encrypted radios at scheduled intervals. The next scheduled contact is not for another 6 hours. If we send a message now, before they expect to hear from their teammate, they might not suspect it is a trap." Hendricks considered this. "What exactly would you propose we transmit?" Kovacs had already drafted the message. "We send a communication stating that coalition forces are conducting a sweep of suspected sniper positions and that we need to relocate to a fallback coordination point. We provide grid coordinates for a location that appears strategically sound but is actually completely exposed to our observation posts. If they respond and move to that location, we will have them. And if Raven 6 warns them it is a trap, then we know for certain that Raven 6 has access to our operational planning in real time, which further narrows our suspect pool. Either way, we gain intelligence." Hendricks made his decision. "Do it. Send a message and prepare a reception committee at your proposed coordination point. But Captain, if this goes wrong, if the enemy snipers realize it is a trap and engage our forces, we will have alerted them to our knowledge of their operation without gaining any tactical advantage." "Understood, sir. I accept that risk." Kovacs returned to the intelligence cell and worked with the communications technician to compose the message in the same format and encryption as the previous transmissions. The message was brief and urgent. "Coalition sweep active in primary sectors. Recommend immediate displacement to fallback point Delta 7. Confirm receipt and movement timeline." The message was transmitted at 1500 hours. Then they waited. Gunnery Sergeant Rains positioned 2 scout sniper teams with observation on the fallback coordinates Kovacs had provided. A quick reaction force staged nearby, ready to move if the enemy snipers appeared. The entire operation hinged on whether the remaining shooters would trust the message enough to expose themselves. At 1620 hours, the encrypted radio crackled to life. Message received. Moving to Delta 7 at 1700 hours. Confirm security status. Kovacs transmitted the response. Security status green. No coalition observation detected at Delta 7. Proceed with caution. She had them. 2 enemy snipers moving to a location where Marine Scout sniper teams were already positioned and waiting. This would end today. The sniper cell that had killed 7 Marines and wounded others would be eliminated completely. Gunnery Sergeant Rains confirmed his teams were in position at 1645. Overwatch elements established with clear fields of fire on approach routes to Delta 7. "We are ready, Watchdog." At exactly 1700 hours, 2 figures appeared moving through the terrain toward the fallback coordinates. They moved tactically, using cover and concealment, weapons at the ready. Professional operators who understood fieldcraft and security protocols. But they were walking into a kill zone prepared by Marines who had been trained by the best scout sniper instructor in the Corps. Range transmitted. 2 subjects approaching Delta 7 from a west. Both armed with rifles. Both conducting tactical movement. Requesting confirmation these are hostile targets before engagement. Kovacs watched through the overhead surveillance feed. The 2 figures matched the description and movement patterns of trained snipers. They were carrying equipment consistent with long-range precision rifles. And they were moving to coordinates that only the enemy sniper cell would know about. Confirmed hostile targets, she transmitted. You are authorized to engage when you have clear shots. The scout sniper teams fired simultaneously. For shots total, both enemy snipers dropped instantly. There was no return fire, no escape attempt, just the sudden and final end of a coordinated enemy operation that had plagued FOB Masterson for 3 weeks. Targets down, range reported. Both confirmed enemy Kia. Site is secure. Approaching to confirm and recover equipment. Lieutenant Colonel Hendricks stood beside Kovacs in the TOC, watching the surveillance feed. That was exceptional work, Captain. You identified the threat, translated the intelligence, devised the deception plan, and coordinated the tactical response. You just eliminated an entire enemy sniper cell through pure professional competence. Kovacs felt the weight of the achievement, but also the awareness of what remained unresolved. Sir, we still have the Raven 6 problem. Someone on this base provided intelligence that got Marines killed. We need to identify that person. Agreed. But that is a problem for tomorrow. Today, you deserve recognition for what you have accomplished. The word spread through FOB Masterson within the hour. The enemy sniper cell had been eliminated. All 4 shooters were dead. The threat that had killed 7 Marines and paralyzed patrol operations was finished. Marines who had avoided eye contact with Kovacs just days ago now nodded to her in the chow hall, offered quiet words of respect in the corridors. Staff Sergeant Vega found her in the operations center that evening. Captain Kovacs, I owe you an apology. When my Marine got shot in the market, I blamed you. I told people you were incompetent. I was wrong. You made a mistake that day, but you learned from it and you went on to eliminate an entire enemy operation. That takes courage and professional skill that I should have recognized sooner. Staff Sergeant, your Marine got shot because of my failure to properly assess the threat. You had every right to question my judgment. What matters is that we both learned and adapted. Vega nodded. Ma'am, if you ever need tactical support for future operations, my team would be honored to work with you. That means more than you know, Staff Sergeant. Gunnery Sergeant Rains approached with Corporal Hayes. The 3 of them stood together looking at the tactical map that had been marked with the locations where the 4 enemy snipers had been killed. Ma'am, Hayes said, when I was at Quantico, you taught us that the best snipers are not the ones who never miss. The best snipers are the ones who learn from their misses and adjust their technique. You demonstrated that principle perfectly over the past week. You failed at the market, learned from that failure, and then executed 4 consecutive successful operations. That is the definition of professional excellence. Rains added, Captain, when you first arrived at this FOB, you were just an intelligence officer that nobody respected. Now you are the officer who eliminated an enemy sniper cell through a combination of intelligence work and tactical expertise. You have proven that the best operators are the ones who can think at multiple levels simultaneously. That is a rare skill. Kovacs looked at the map, at the markers showing where the enemy had died, at the faces of the Marines who now treated her as a trusted professional rather than a questionable staff officer. She thought about the journey from the air-conditioned TOC to the dusty streets outside the wire, about the failure that had taught her humility and the successes that had proven her competence. The intelligence officer who nobody knew had become the tactical expert that everyone respected, not through arrogance or self-promotion, but through demonstrated ability under pressure, through the willingness to fail, learn, and execute when it mattered most. And somewhere on this base, Raven 6 was watching. the insider who had enabled the enemy operation, the final threat that would need to be identified and eliminated. But that was a problem for another day. Tonight, FOB Masterson could sleep knowing that the immediate danger had passed, that 7 dead Marines had been avenged, that an intelligence officer with a hidden past had stepped into the light and proven her worth in the most definitive way possible. The counterintelligence investigation into Raven 6 consumed Captain Kovacs for the next 72 hours. She analyzed communication patterns, cross-referenced briefing attendance records, and studied the timeline of information leaks against personnel duty rosters. The insider had been careful, had covered their tracks well, but every operational security breach left traces if you knew where to look. Master Sergeant Shun helped her build the investigative framework, working through the night shifts when the TOC was quiet and they could examine classified materials without drawing attention. They narrowed the suspect pool from 30 personnel to 12, then from 12 to 5. Each elimination required painstaking verification of alibis and access logs. At 0300 on the 4th day, after the final sniper elimination, Kovacs found the connection she had been searching for. A pattern of communications sent from the base communication center at times that coincided with specific briefings. The sender had used proper authentication codes, but the message routing showed subtle irregularities that suggested unauthorized access to classified systems. She pulled the access logs for the communication center and cross-referenced them against the duty roster. One name appeared consistently during the time frames when unauthorized messages were sent. Staff Sergeant Marcus Reeves, Communications Section Chief, 22 years of service, sterling record, trusted by everyone on the base. Shun looked at the evidence and shook his head. Ma'am, are you certain about this? Reeves has been in the Corps longer than most officers have been alive. He has medals for valor from Iraq and Afghanistan. Accusing him of being an enemy collaborator is going to require ironclad proof. I have the access logs, the message routing data, and the timeline correlation, Kovacs said. But you are right. This level of accusation requires more than circumstantial evidence. We need something definitive. What are you thinking? A controlled operation. We feed Reeves specific false information in a briefing and see if that information gets transmitted to external contacts. If he takes the bait, we will have him. They brought the plan to Lieutenant Colonel Hendricks at 0600 during the morning briefing. Hendricks listened to the evidence, studied the logs, and weighed the implications of accusing a senior NCO with decades of honorable service. Captain Kovacs, if you are wrong about this, if Staff Sergeant Reeves is innocent and we accuse him of treason, it will destroy his career and reputation. Are you absolutely confident in your assessment? Sir, I am confident in the pattern of evidence. But confidence is not certainty. That is why I recommend the controlled operation rather than an immediate arrest. We verify the suspicion before we take action that cannot be reversed. Hendricks approved the plan. That afternoon, he conducted a special briefing restricted to senior leadership. The briefing detailed a fictional coalition operation plan for the following week, complete with specific grid coordinates, timing, and unit designations. The information was plausible enough to seem legitimate but completely fabricated. Only 7 people attended the briefing. Staff Sergeant Reeves was one of them. Kovacs monitored the communications center remotely, watching the encrypted traffic flowing through the base systems. For 3 hours, nothing unusual occurred. Standard operational traffic. Routine administrative messages. She began to doubt her analysis. Maybe Reeves was innocent. Maybe the pattern she had identified was coincidence rather than conspiracy. Then at 1900 hours, an encrypted message transmitted from the communications center using proper authentication codes, but routing through an external relay that had no legitimate operational purpose. The message contained details from the afternoon briefing, grid coordinates, timing, unit designations, everything. Shun watched the transmission logs with her. That is it, ma'am. That is your proof. Reeves just transmitted classified operational information to an unauthorized external contact. Kovacs felt no satisfaction, only the grim awareness that someone she had trusted, someone the entire base had trusted, had betrayed them all. Contact the military police. Tell them to take Staff Sergeant Reeves into custody immediately. Charge is unauthorized disclosure of classified information and conspiracy with enemy forces. The arrest happened quietly. Military police entered the communications center at 19:15 and escorted Reeves out in flex cuffs. He did not resist, did not proclaim innocence, just walked with them silently, his face expressionless, while Marines who had served with him for years watched in stunned disbelief. The interrogation revealed the full scope of the betrayal. Reeves had been compromised 2 years earlier while on leave outside the United States. An enemy intelligence service had obtained information about gambling debts and financial problems. They had offered him money in exchange for information. Small things at first. Patrol schedules, base layout, nothing that seemed critically important. But over time, the request had escalated. And when the sniper cell had been deployed to the region, Reeves had been tasked with providing the intelligence that made their operations possible. 7 Marines had died because of his betrayal. Others had been wounded. An entire base had been terrorized by an enemy threat that should have been impossible to sustain without inside information. And all of it could be traced back to one senior NCO who had chosen money over honor. Lieutenant Colonel Hendricks called a formation the next morning. The entire base assembled in the central courtyard, hundreds of Marines standing in neat ranks under the desert sun. Hendricks stood on a platform where everyone could see him. Yesterday, we arrested Staff Sergeant Marcus Reeves on charges of espionage and conspiracy with enemy forces. The investigation conducted by Captain Kovacs revealed that Reeves had been providing classified operational information to the enemy sniper cell that killed 7 of our Marines. His betrayal enabled those attacks. His actions constitute treason in a time of war. He will face court-martial and the full consequences of his crimes. The formation was silent. Marines stared straight ahead, their faces reflecting shock and anger and the bitter awareness that one of their own had betrayed them. Hendricks continued, "I want to recognize Captain Elena Kovacs for her exceptional work over the past 3 weeks. When we were being hunted by enemy snipers, Captain Kovacs identified their positions, predicted their tactics, and coordinated the operations that eliminated all 4 shooters. When we discovered evidence of an insider threat, Captain Kovacs conducted the investigation that identified and arrested the traitor. She did this while overcoming doubt from her fellow Marines, while proving herself in the field after 11 months behind a desk, and while maintaining the highest standards of professional competence under extreme pressure." He gestured for Kovacs to join him on the platform. She had not been expecting this, had not prepared any remarks. She climbed the steps and stood beside Hendricks while hundreds of Marines looked at her. Captain Kovacs came to this FOB as an intelligence officer that most of you dismissed as a desk-bound staff weenie, Hendricks said. What you did not know was that before she became an intelligence officer, she was a Marine Corps Scout sniper school instructor at Quantico. She trained many of the snipers serving in our Corps today. When this base needed her expertise, she stepped forward despite knowing she would face skepticism and doubt. She failed once, learned from that failure, and then executed a series of operations that saved lives and eliminated threats. That is the definition of a Marine. He turned to face her directly. "Captain Kovacs, on behalf of FOB Masterson and all coalition forces in this area, thank you for your service and your sacrifice. You have earned the respect of every Marine on this base." The formation erupted in applause. Not the polite acknowledgement of a routine ceremony, but genuine recognition from warriors who understood what she had accomplished. Staff Sergeant Vega was clapping, Lieutenant Morris, Gunnery Sergeant Rains, and Corporal Hayes. Even Marines who had never spoken to her were showing their respect. Kovacs felt emotion rise in her throat, but controlled it. She nodded to Hendricks, saluted the formation, and returned to her position. The ceremony concluded and the formation dispersed, but Marines continued to approach her throughout the day, thanking her, asking questions about Quantico, requesting advice on sniper tactics, treating her not as a staff officer, but as a respected operator who had proven her worth in the most demanding circumstances possible. That evening, she sat with Rains and Hayes in the chow hall. Other Marines joined them. The conversation was easy, professional, the kind of camaraderie that developed between people who had faced danger together and survived. Someone asked about her longest confirmed kill, and she told the story of Helmand Province. Someone else asked about teaching at Quantico, and she shared the challenges of training young Marines to become professional snipers. Hayes looked at her with obvious pride. "Ma'am, when I was your student at Quantico, I never imagined I would serve with you in combat. But now that I have, I can tell everyone that the best instructor I ever had was also the best tactical operator I ever worked with. That is something special." Raines raised his coffee cup in a mock toast. To Captain Kovacs, the intelligence officer who turned out to be a stone-cold sniper hunter. The staff officer who eliminated an enemy cell through pure tactical brilliance. The Marine who proved that the most dangerous operators are the ones nobody sees coming. They all raised their cups, and Kovacs felt the warmth of acceptance that came from earning respect through demonstrated competence. She had started at this FOB as an invisible intelligence officer that nobody trusted. She was ending as a recognized expert who had saved lives and eliminated threats. The rifle case sat in her quarters, clean and ready. The M40A6 with its Quantico instructor plaque. The weapon that represented who she had been and who she still was beneath the intelligence officer cover. She no longer needed to hide it. No longer needed to pretend that she was just a desk-bound analyst. The secret was out, and the revelation had made her more effective, not less. Tomorrow she would return to her intelligence work, analyzing intercepts and studying enemy patterns. But now when she made recommendations, patrol leaders would listen. When she identified threats, commanders would act. Because she had proven in the most definitive way possible that intelligence officers could be operators. That the best tactical minds were the ones who could think at multiple levels simultaneously. That the Marine Corps had been right to send a scout sniper instructor into intelligence work, because that combination created something more dangerous than either specialty alone. Master Sergeant Chen found her outside her quarters that night. "Ma'am, I have been in the Corps for 26 years, and I have seen a lot of Marines do exceptional things. But what you did over the past 3 weeks, that was something special. You changed how this entire base thinks about intelligence officers." "I just did my job, Master Sergeant." "No, ma'am. You did more than your job. You showed everyone that the most effective warriors are the ones who can adapt, who can learn from failure, who can operate across multiple domains. That is a lesson that will stay with these Marines for the rest of their careers." Kovacs looked at the night sky, clear and filled with stars. Somewhere out there, other enemy threats were planning operations. Other bases needed the kind of combined intelligence and tactical expertise she could provide. The war would continue. The missions would evolve. But she had proven to herself and everyone else that she could function at the highest levels when the stakes were real and the pressure was maximum. The intelligence officer who nobody knew had become the tactical expert everyone respected. And that transformation, earned through failure and success, through humility and competence, was complete. 6 weeks after the elimination of the enemy sniper cell, Captain Elena Kovacs sat in the Tactical Operations Center reviewing intelligence reports from across the region. The work was familiar now, comfortable in the way that essential duties become when you have proven your competence beyond question. But something had changed fundamentally. When she made assessments now, commanders acted on them immediately. When she identified threats, resources were allocated without hesitation. The intelligence officer that nobody had trusted had become the most respected tactical analyst on FOB Masterson. Lieutenant Colonel Hendricks entered the TOC carrying a folder marked with classification stamps. "Captain Kovacs, I need a moment of your time." She followed him to his office where he closed the door and gestured for her to sit. The folder lay on his desk between them. "Captain, I received orders this morning from Regional Command. They have been following the reports about the sniper cell elimination and the counterintelligence investigation. They are impressed with your performance, and they are requesting your transfer to a joint task force that specializes in counter-sniper operations across the theater." Kovacs felt surprise, mixed with uncertainty. "Sir, I am honored by the request, but my current assignment is intelligence work. I thought the Marine Corps wanted me focused on analysis rather than tactical operations. Hendricks opened the folder and showed her the orders. The Marine Corps has revised its assessment of your optimal utilization. Your performance here demonstrated that your unique combination of scout sniper expertise and intelligence analysis creates capabilities that are rare and valuable. The Joint Task Force wants you to train other intelligence officers in tactical counter-sniper methodology while also conducting field operations when high-value targets require your specific skill set. She read through the orders, processing the implications. This was not a temporary assignment or a one-time deployment. This was a permanent change in her career trajectory, a recognition that the path she had taken from scout sniper instructor to intelligence officer had created something more valuable than either specialty alone. When would the transfer take effect, sir? 30 days. That gives you time to transition your current intelligence responsibilities and prepare for the new assignment. Captain, I want you to know that this base will miss you. You change how we think about intelligence work. You proved that the best operators are the ones who can function at multiple levels simultaneously. That lesson will stay with these Marines long after you are gone. Thank you, sir. Serving here has been an honor despite the challenges. The word spread quickly through the base. Captain Kovacs was leaving. The intelligence officer who had eliminated an enemy sniper cell and identified a traitor was being transferred to a regional assignment. Marines who had served with her during the operation sought her out to express gratitude and respect. Staff Sergeant Vega found her in the operations building. Ma'am, I heard you were leaving. I wanted to thank you personally for what you did. When my Marine got shot in the market, I blamed you and I was wrong to do that. You showed me that failure is not the end of competence. It is just part of the learning process. That is a lesson I will carry with me for the rest of my career. Staff Sergeant, your criticism was justified at the time. I made a mistake that put your Marine at risk. What matters is that we both learned and became more effective because of it. Lieutenant Morris approached with several of his Marines. Captain, we want to give you something before you leave. The Marines pulled out a wooden plaque with the FOB Masterson insignia carved into it. Below the insignia were inscribed words. Captain Elena Kovacs, Intelligence Officer, Scout Sniper, Warrior. Thank you for teaching us that expertise comes in unexpected forms. Kovacs accepted the plaque, genuinely moved. Gentlemen, this means more to me than you know. Thank you. Gunnery Sergeant Rains and Corporal Hayes found her that evening in the armory, where she was preparing her gear for transport. Rains carried a bottle and 3 glasses. Ma'am, we are not supposed to have alcohol on this FOB, but some things are worth bending the rules for. He poured 3 glasses of whiskey and handed them out. To Captain Kovacs, the instructor who taught me that I still had things to learn. The operator who showed this base what professional excellence looks like. And the Marine who proved that the most dangerous people are the ones everyone underestimates. They raised their glasses and drank. The whiskey burned, but the moment was worth it. He set down his glass. Ma'am, when I was your student at Quantico, you taught me that the best snipers are invisible until the moment they take the shot. You live that principle here. You were invisible for 11 months as an intelligence officer, and then when the moment came, you took your shot and eliminated an entire enemy operation. That is the perfect demonstration of what you taught us. Rains added, Captain, I have worked with a lot of officers during my career. Most of them fell into 2 categories. The ones who never admit failure and the ones who let failure define them. You are rare because you failed, acknowledged it, learned from it, and then exceeded every expectation. That is the mark of a true professional. The conversation continued for hours. They talked about Quantico, about the operations over the past weeks, about the lessons learned and the battles yet to come. By the time they finished, Kovacs understood that she was leaving behind more than just a duty station. She was leaving behind Marines who had become colleagues, students who had become peers, and skeptics who had become believers. The final days passed quickly. Kovacs transitioned her intelligence responsibilities to her replacement, briefed the incoming officer on threat patterns and analysis methodologies, and prepared her personal gear for movement. The rifle case with the M40A6 was packed carefully, the weapon that had represented her hidden identity now openly acknowledged and respected. On her last morning at FOB Masterson, she walked through the base one final time. The operations building where she had spent countless hours analyzing intelligence. The vehicle bay where patrols had departed and returned. The armory where she had prepared for operations. The Chow Hall where she had earned acceptance through demonstrated competence. Master Sergeant Shun met her at the helicopter landing zone where the transport would arrive to take her to the regional headquarters. He carried 2 cups of coffee and handed her one. "Ma'am, I've been thinking about what you accomplished here. You came to this FOB as someone nobody knew and nobody respected. You left as someone everyone will remember. That transformation did not happen because you demanded recognition. It happened because you earned it through professional performance when the stakes were highest. Master Sergeant, I could not have accomplished any of it without support from Marines like you. The ones who believed in me even when others doubted. The ones who gave me opportunities to prove myself. That support made everything possible." Chin smiled. "Ma'am, you give too much credit to others. We provided opportunities, but you seized them. You made the decisions. You took the risks. You executed under pressure. That was all you." The helicopter appeared in the distance, growing larger as it approached the landing zone. Marines had gathered to see her off. Not a formal ceremony, just professionals acknowledging one of their own. Rains and Hayes, Vega and Morris, dozens of others who had served alongside her during the operations. Hendricks approached and shook her hand. "Captain Kovacs, good luck with the new assignment. Make us proud." "I will do my best, sir." The helicopter landed and she climbed aboard with her gear. As the aircraft lifted off, she looked down at FOB Masterson, growing smaller below. The base where she had been tested and proven, where she had failed and learned, where she had transformed from an invisible intelligence officer into a recognized tactical expert. The Marines below were waving. She waved back, knowing that this chapter of her career was ending, but a new one was beginning. The Joint Task Force assignment would bring new challenges, new opportunities to use her unique combination of skills. Other bases needed what she could provide. Other Marines needed training in the methodologies she had developed. But FOB Masterson would always be special. This was where she had stepped out of the shadows, where she had proven that intelligence officers could be warriors, where she had demonstrated that the most dangerous operators were the ones nobody saw coming until it was too late. The helicopter turned toward the regional headquarters, and FOB Masterson disappeared behind the horizon. Captain Elena Kovacs settled in her seat and thought about the journey ahead. The intelligence officer who had been just an analyst. The scout sniper instructor who had hidden her expertise. The Marine who had proven that expertise comes in unexpected forms and that the most effective professionals are the ones who can operate across multiple domains simultaneously. If this story moved you, drop a comment about your favorite moment, or tell us if you have ever witnessed someone reveal unexpected expertise that changed everything. She was ready for whatever came next, because she had learned the most important lesson of all, that identity was not fixed, that capabilities could be hidden until the moment they were needed, and that the most valuable Marines were the ones who could adapt, learn, and execute when everything was on the line. The intelligence officer who nobody knew had become the legend everyone would remember. And that transformation, earned through blood and effort and unwavering commitment to excellence, was a story that would be told at FOB Masterson for years to come. The story of Captain Elena Kovacs, intelligence officer, scout sniper instructor, warrior, the Marine who proved that the deadliest weapon was not the rifle, but the mind that knew exactly when and how to use it.